She confessed, "I can't have any children." He laughed and said, "I have enough love for both of us." But by the time the world finished attacking her for being incomplete, Marcella would be gone, and Joseph Rudd would have to choose between his billion-dollar empire and the truth that some things matter more than blood. 18 months after her ex-fiancé abandoned her over the infertility diagnosis, Marcella met the millionaire everyone called heartless, and his acceptance of her deepest shame felt impossible until his jealous ex-lover Harriet Trim returned from Europe with a plan to reclaim him by destroying Marcella publicly, bribing Joseph's business partner to embezzle millions while leaking Marcella's private medical history to tabloids that branded her a barren fraud. The harassment escalated until Marcella vanished to protect Joseph, leaving him broken and searching. But when he finally tracked her to a children's home, where she'd become a mother to orphans, she could never birth herself, he dropped to one knee in the rain with a ring and a question that would prove family isn't measured by DNA, but by the courage to stay when the world says you're not enough. But all she could think about was him. Joseph Rudd stood across the terrace surrounded by admirers, his tailored suit catching the amber glow of the skyline. He wasn't laughing or performing, just listening with the kind of attention that made people feel seen. Something about his stillness drew her, even as she told herself to look away. "That's Joseph Rudd," a woman beside her whispered to her companion, "the self-made millionaire who refuses to date anyone." "Cold as ice, they say," the other replied, "built his fortune on ruthless deals and broken partnerships." Something twisted in Marcella's chest. 18 months ago, she'd received the final diagnosis, the one that ended not just her fertility treatments, but her engagement. Barren, the doctor had said clinically, as if the word didn't carry the weight of every dream she'd buried. Her fiancé had left 3 days later, his goodbye still echoing. "I need someone whole." She would never be a mother. And now, watching this man the world called heartless, she wondered if loneliness recognized loneliness across crowded rooms. Marcella dug her nails into her palm and turned toward the exit when a passing server accidentally bumped her, spilling red wine across her ivory gown. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," the young man stammered. "It's fine," Marcella said quickly, but the stain had already spread like blood across silk. She tried to dab it with a napkin when someone extended a handkerchief beside her. "Here," a voice said, low, unhurried, closer than she expected. Marcella looked up. Joseph Rudd stood before her, his gray eyes holding something that wasn't pity, just curiosity. "Do you always hide at the edge of beautiful things?" he asked. She blinked, caught off guard. "I wasn't hiding." "No," his mouth curved slightly. "You've been watching the exit since you arrived." Heat crept up her neck. "I don't belong here. I'm just filling in for a friend." "Neither do I," he said simply. "I'm only here because they threatened to name the charity wing after me if I didn't show up." Despite herself, Marcella smiled. "That's a terrible threat, isn't it?" He gestured to the terrace railing. "Walk with me? The view is better away from the crowd." She should have said no, should have made an excuse and left. But something in his voice, lonely, genuine, made her nod. "Hey, my wonderful family. My heart is full of love for you. You're my light in every season. May heaven bless you with favor and joy. May every sunrise bring peace and every night bring rest. You are covered, chosen, and loved beyond words. Thank you for being part of this family. Tell me where you're watching from. Now let's continue." They stood at the edge of the rooftop, the city spreading below them like scattered stars. "I'm Marcella," she said quietly. "Joseph." He studied her profile. "You look at the skyline like you're memorizing it." "I just know beauty doesn't last," she replied, the words escaping before she could stop them. His expression shifted, something unguarded passing across his face. "No," he agreed softly, "but that doesn't make it less worth seeing." For a moment, neither spoke, just two strangers standing in expensive clothes, pretending they weren't both running from something. Then Joseph said, "Have dinner with me tomorrow." Marcella turned, searching his face for mockery or game playing. She found neither. "You don't even know me. I know you watch exits. I know you think you don't belong in places you're standing. And I know," he paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes, "I know I'd like to understand why." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. Men like him didn't want women like her. Women with secrets that ended relationships, with bodies that couldn't give them what society expected. But before she could stop herself, Marcella whispered, "Okay." His smile transformed his face. No longer the cold millionaire from the gossip columns, but someone hopeful and human. "Tomorrow then," he said. As he walked away, Marcella pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race in a way it hadn't in 18 months. She didn't know it yet, but that single word, okay, would unravel everything she'd built to protect herself. And in 6 weeks, when she finally whispered her secret over wine and dying candlelight, his response would either destroy her or save her. Weeks later, after dinners that turned into conversations that lasted until dawn, after laughter that made her forget to guard her heart, Marcella knew she couldn't hide anymore. They sat in Joseph's penthouse overlooking the same skyline where they'd met. He'd been talking about future plans, renovating the foundation, expanding into children's programs. When he said it casually, "I've always imagined a house full of kids, chaos and laughter in every room." Marcella's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Her throat closed. "Marcella?" Joseph leaned forward, concerned. "What's wrong?" She set the glass down with trembling hands. 6 weeks of happiness, of feeling whole for the first time in 18 months, and now it would end, just like before. "Joseph," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. "There's something I need to tell you." "Okay." His voice stayed steady, but she heard the tension underneath. "I can't." She forced the words out, each one like swallowing glass. "I can't have any children." Silence fell, the kind that stretches and breaks things. Marcella's pulse hammered in her ears. She waited for the withdrawal, the careful distance, the inevitable "I need time to think" that meant goodbye. Instead, Joseph did something she never expected. He laughed, not cruelly, but with a gentleness that made her finally look up. His eyes held no pity, no disappointment, just ease. "Then it's a good thing," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "that I've got enough love for both of us." Marcella stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You what?" "Marcella." He squeezed her fingers. "I don't need children. I need you. Everything else, we'll figure it out. Together." Something inside her shattered. 18 months of armor, of believing she was less than, of carrying shame like a second skin. It all broke apart, and what emerged underneath was raw and terrified and desperately hoping he meant it. "But everyone expects," she started. "I don't live for everyone else's expectations," Joseph interrupted. "I barely survived doing that in business. I'm not doing it with my life." Tears blurred her vision. "You say that now, but later when you're watching your friends' children, when you realize what you're giving up." "I'm not giving up anything." His voice was firm now, certain. "I'm choosing you. There's a difference." Marcella let the tears fall, let herself be seen in all her broken, incomplete glory. And Joseph stayed. He didn't flinch, didn't retreat. He simply held her hand and waited for her to believe what he'd already decided. That night, as they stood on his balcony watching the city lights blur into constellations, Marcella whispered, "I was engaged before. He left when he found out." "Then he was a fool," Joseph said quietly. "He said he needed someone whole." Joseph turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Marcella, you're not broken. You're just honest about your scars. That's not the same thing." For the first time since the diagnosis, since the ended engagement, since the months of believing she was unlovable, Marcella felt something stir that she thought was dead forever. Hope. And she didn't know it yet, but 6 months later, when Harriet Trim's cruelty would test everything they'd built, when tabloids would call her barren gold digger, when she'd pack her bags and try to walk away, Joseph would prove that his words weren't just comfort. They were a promise he intended to keep. The flowers arrived on a Tuesday morning. Marcella stared at the arrangement on her desk. White peonies and pale roses in a simple glass vase, elegant without being ostentatious. The card tucked between the stems read, "Thank you for saying okay." Jay, her coworker Sarah leaned over the cubicle divider, eyes wide. Who sent those? Just someone I met at the gala, Marcella said, touching a pedal. Someone with excellent taste. Sarah grinned and money by the looks of it. Marcella didn't tell her it was Joseph Rudd. Didn't want to hear the questions, the warnings, the inevitable, what are you doing with someone like that? She was already asking herself the same thing. By Wednesday, a black car idled outside her office building at closing time. The driver, professional, polite, handed her an envelope. I know you can drive yourself, the note inside read, but I thought you might enjoy not having to. Dinner reservations are at 7. No pressure if you'd rather take your own car. Jay, Marcella stood on the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, torn between running and staying. The driver waited patiently, no judgment in his expression. Ma'am, he finally asked, shall I take you home to change first? She got in the car. Their first dinner was nothing like she expected. No flashy restaurant with photographers lurking outside. No show of wealth designed to impress. Instead, Joseph had reserved a quiet corner table at a small Italian place tucked away from the main streets. Candlelight, soft music. The kind of intimate space that made conversation feel necessary and safe. I hope this is okay, he said as they sat. I figured we'd both had enough of crowds. It's perfect, Marcella admitted, and meant it. Over pasta and wine, Joseph asked about her work. Really asked, following up on details, remembering things she mentioned. He wanted to know about her degree in nonprofit management, about the youth literacy program she'd helped launch before funding cuts shut it down. That must have been devastating, he said quietly. It was. Marcella looked down at her wine. We just started seeing real progress with the kids. Then the board voted to reallocate resources and she stopped, surprised by how easily the words came. Her ex-fiancé had never asked about her work, had called it charity busy work when she tried to share. What would you do, Joseph asked, if money wasn't an obstacle? She laughed softly. That's a dangerous question. Humor me. Marcella thought for a moment. I'd rebuild it, the literacy program, but bigger, with after-school spaces and mentorship, something that didn't depend on board votes or shifting priorities. Joseph smiled, the real one she was learning to recognize, not the polished mask he wore for the world. You should do it. With what funding? We'll figure it out. The casual we made her heart skip, like he'd already decided they were a team. The weeks that followed felt like falling, terrifying and exhilarating and inevitable. More dinners. Late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight. A Saturday afternoon walking through the botanical gardens, Joseph's jacket draped over her shoulders when the wind picked up. He told her about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success, about feeling like he was performing even in his own life. Until recently, he'd added, looking at her. Marcella felt her armor cracking with each shared confidence. Each moment he chose honesty over impression. She was falling for him, had probably been falling since that first night on the rooftop, and the terror of it paralyzed her. Because she knew what came next, the question every relationship reached, the conversation that had ended her engagement and made her believe she'd never find this again. One evening, after a late drive through the city, Joseph pulled up to a residential neighborhood she didn't recognize. Grand old houses lined the street, lights glowing warm in windows. I'm thinking of buying a house, he said, nodding toward a Victorian with a wraparound porch. The penthouse is fine for now, but eventually, he trailed off, smiling. I keep imagining something like this. Big kitchen, rooms that echo with noise, kids running through halls. Marcella's chest tightened. Kids? Yeah, his voice was soft, wistful. I grew up in foster care, bounced between homes until I aged out at 18. Always told myself if I ever had the means, I'd create the opposite. A house that felt permanent, safe, full of family. Her throat closed. That sounds beautiful. What about you? He turned to her. Do you want children? The question she'd been dreading, the moment everything would change. She looked out the window, unable to meet his eyes. It's complicated. Joseph waited, patient as always, and Marcella felt the weight of her secret pressing against her ribs. She could lie. could say maybe someday and postpone the inevitable. But he'd been honest with her about his loneliness, his fears, his dreams. He deserved the same. Can we talk about it over dinner? She finally asked. Soon? Of course. He squeezed her hand gently. Whenever you're ready. 3 nights later, Marcella sat across from Joseph in his penthouse, the city spread below them like scattered stars. She'd barely touched her wine, her hands trembling too much to hold the glass steady. Marcella, Joseph leaned forward, whatever you need to tell me, it's okay. You don't know that? Then let me decide. She took a shaky breath, thought of her ex-fiancé's face when she told him, the pity, the careful distance, the way he'd said, I need someone whole, like she was broken beyond repair. Joseph, she whispered, forcing herself to look at him. There's something I need to tell you. He nodded, expression open, waiting. I can't. The words caught in her throat. She tried again. I can't have any children. Silence fell, the kind that stretches seconds into eternities. Marcella's pulse hammered in her ears. Her throat burned with shame and fear, and the certainty that she'd just destroyed the best thing that had happened to her in years. Then Joseph did something she never expected. He laughed. Not cruelly, but softly, warmly, with a gentleness that made her finally lift her eyes to his. Then it's fine, he said, reaching across the table to take both her hands in his. Marcella, I've got enough love for both of us. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You, what? You think that changes anything? His thumb stroked her knuckles. I told you about wanting a house full of kids because that's what I imagine. But that's not what I need. I need you. Everything else, we'll figure it out together. But your dreams change, he interrupted gently. I spent 18 years dreaming about survival. Then I spent 10 dreaming about success. Now I'm dreaming about you. That's allowed. Tears blurred her vision. 18 months of believing she was less than, of carrying shame like a stone in her chest, of thinking no one would want her as she was. It all cracked open. Joseph, her voice broke. My ex-fiancé left when I told him. He said he needed someone who could give him a real family. Then he was an idiot. Joseph's voice hardened slightly. Marcella, you're not broken. You're not incomplete. You're exactly who I want. She let the tears fall, let herself be vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed since the diagnosis, and Joseph stayed. He didn't flinch, didn't offer false promises or empty comfort. He simply held her hands and waited for her to believe what he already knew. I don't understand, she finally whispered. Why doesn't this bother you? Because loving someone isn't about checking boxes, he said. It's about choosing them, all of them, and I'm choosing you. Something inside Marcella shifted, not healing completely, but beginning to, like the first breath after being underwater too long. Okay, she breathed. Okay? Okay, I believe you. She squeezed his hands. Or at least, I want to try. Joseph smiled, that real smile that transformed his face, and pulled her into his arms. Marcella buried her face in his shoulder and felt, for the first time in 18 months, like maybe she could be enough exactly as she was. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, his laughter, his acceptance, his unwavering certainty, would become the foundation they'd need when Harriet Trim's cruelty tested everything. When the world called her inadequate, Joseph's words would be the anchor she returned to. I've got enough love for both of us. And somehow, impossibly, she was starting to believe him. The city transformed into something magical over the next 6 weeks. Marcella found herself laughing again, real laughter that came from somewhere deep and forgotten. Late dinners at hidden restaurants where Joseph would order half the menu just to watch her try everything. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, his hand warm in hers as they wandered through stalls of flowers and fresh bread. Evening walks along the riverfront where the lights turned the water into liquid gold, and conversation flowed easier than it ever had with anyone else. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Joseph said one night as they stood watching boats drift past. Marcella leaned against the railing. I used to sing, before everything. I was in a church choir, Had dreams of maybe teaching music someday. Why did you stop? She was quiet for a moment. After the diagnosis, after my fiance left, I couldn't. The joy felt like a lie I was telling myself, like I didn't deserve it anymore. Joseph turned her to face him. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's just how it was. Sing something now, he urged gently. Joseph, please, just a few notes, for me. Marcella looked at him, this man who asked for her broken pieces without flinching, and hummed the first bars of an old hymn. Her voice cracked, rusty from disuse, but Joseph's expression softened into something reverent. Beautiful, he whispered. And for the first time in 18 months, Marcella believed him. But happiness, she was learning, always brought shadows. Late at night, when Joseph slept beside her in his penthouse, Marcella would lie awake remembering. The doctor's office. The word barren delivered like a diagnosis and a judgment simultaneously. Her fiancé Marcus, sitting in the waiting room, already pulling away before they'd even left the building. I want children, Marcella. Biological children. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. The memory still had claws. She'd watch Joseph's chest rise and fall in sleep and think, when will he realize? When will he want more than I can give? One morning, she found him at his laptop looking at real estate listings, houses with yards, family neighborhoods. Just browsing, he said when he caught her watching. Someday, maybe. Someday. The word felt like a ticking clock. The invitation arrived on embossed cardstock, a charity gala hosted by the Cultural Foundation. Joseph's name was listed as a sponsor. We don't have to go, he said, noting her expression. No, it's fine. You should support your causes. What she didn't say, I'm terrified of your world, of not belonging, of everyone seeing what I can't give you. The ballroom was everything she remembered from that first night. Champagne, designer gowns, conversations that danced around power and money. Joseph kept her close, his hand at the small of her back, but Marcella felt the stares, the whispers. Then she appeared. Harriet Trim swept through the crowd like she owned it, tall, blonde, draped in emerald silk that matched her calculating eyes. She'd been in Europe for months, according to the society pages, but now she moved with purpose toward Joseph. Darling, Harriet purred, air-kissing near his cheeks. I heard you'd taken up with someone new. Harriet, Joseph's voice cooled several degrees. I didn't realize you were back. Just returned. Her gaze slid to Marcella, assessing and dismissing in one sweep. And this must be her. Marcella Bench, Joseph said firmly. My girlfriend. How charming. Harriet's smile was poison wrapped in pearls. Tell me, dear, what do you do? I work in non-profit management. Oh, how noble. The words dripped condescension. And how did you meet our Joseph? At a charity gala, Marcella said evenly, though her heart raced. Similar to this one. Harriet's eyes flickered with something predatory. Well, I do hope you're enjoying it while it lasts. Joseph's hand tightened on Marcella's waist. Excuse us, Harriet. We have other guests to greet. But as they moved away, Harriet's voice carried, intentionally loud enough to be overheard by the cluster of socialites nearby. She can't even give him an air. How long before he realizes what he's missing? Marcella's steps faltered. The room tilted slightly. Joseph stopped, turned, and walked back to Harriet with deliberate calm. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but laced with steel. You mistake legacy for love, Harriet. I've already made my choice. And unlike you, she doesn't measure her worth by what she can produce. The nearby conversations died. Harriet's face flushed crimson. Come on, Joseph murmured to Marcella, guiding her toward the exit. Outside, Marcella pressed her palms against the cool marble wall, breathing hard. I'm sorry, Joseph said. She's right. Marcella's voice cracked. That's the problem. Everything she said is true. No, he turned her to face him. Everything she said was cruel. There's a difference. But you want children. You said, I want you, he interrupted. Marcella, look at me. I want you. Everything else, we'll figure it out. Adoption, fostering, building something together. There are 1,000 ways to create family. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But Harriet's words echoed in her mind all the way home. What Marcella didn't know was that Harriet Trim wasn't finished. In a penthouse across the city, Harriet poured scotch for James Gibbs, Joseph's business partner and oldest friend. They'd been meeting in secret for months, ever since Harriet returned from Europe with plans and promises. "He humiliated me," Harriet said, swirling her glass, "in front of everyone." James loosened his tie, conflicted. "Maybe you should let it go. Joseph seems happy." "Happy?" Harriet laughed bitterly. "With that nobody? She's using him, James. Can't you see it? She found a rich man to solve her problems." "You don't know that." "I know he turned his back on me for someone who can't even give him children." She moved closer, her hand on James's arm. "Help me fix this. Help me show him what he's throwing away. Then when he comes to his senses, you and I can rebuild his empire together, the way it should have been." James had loved Harriet since college, hopeless, unrequited, pathetic. And now she was offering him everything he'd ever wanted: her attention, her partnership, her promise of something more. "What do you need me to do?" he heard himself ask. Harriet smiled. "Just give me access to Joseph's financial records. Let me see where he's vulnerable. The rest will take care of itself." James knew it was wrong, knew Joseph trusted him. But when Harriet leaned in and kissed him, soft, promising, he stopped thinking about right and wrong. He thought only about finally being chosen. The first anonymous letter arrived at Marcelo's apartment 3 days later. "You think he loves you? He's just bored. Wait until he remembers what real women can offer." She burned it in the kitchen sink, hands shaking. The second came with photos, her entering Joseph's building, time-stamped and captioned, "Gold Digger's Daily Schedule." By the third letter, Marcella stopped opening her mail. Then the tabloids started. "Millionaire's mystery woman. Who is Marcella Bench?" Joseph Rudd's new romance raises questions. "The barren truth. Why Joseph's girlfriend can't give him an heir." That last headline broke her. Someone had leaked her medical history. Someone had taken her most private pain and made it public consumption. Joseph found her in his penthouse, sitting on the bathroom floor, the tablet displaying the article clutched in her hands. "Marcella." He knelt beside her. "Who did this?" "Does it matter?" Her voice was hollow. "It's true. Every word. It's private and cruel and illegal." His jaw set. "I'm calling my lawyers." "Don't." She looked up at him. "It'll just make it worse. More stories, more speculation." "So we do nothing?" "We—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "I don't know." Joseph pulled her against his chest, and she felt him trembling, not with fear, but with rage barely controlled. "I'll fix this," he promised, "whatever it takes." But that night, as rain began to fall against the windows and thunder rumbled over the city, Marcella wondered if some things were too broken to fix, if loving her would cost Joseph everything he'd built, and if she was strong enough to watch it happen. The business of betrayal, Marcella would learn, was quieter than she expected. No dramatic confrontations, no obvious villains, just numbers shifting in spreadsheets, money bleeding from accounts, trust eroding like stone beneath steady rain. Joseph spent long hours with his CFO and legal team, trying to trace where millions had vanished from Rudd Industries. His board grew restless. Investors started making calls. The company he'd built from nothing was suddenly vulnerable, and no one could explain why. Meanwhile, the anonymous harassment escalated. Photos of Marcella appeared on gossip blogs with cruel captions. "The woman who can't, Joseph Rudd's biggest mistake." Her social media, private, protected, was somehow hacked and combed for anything that could be twisted. She stopped going to work after reporters camped outside her office, stopped answering calls from numbers she didn't recognize. The world had decided who she was, and nothing she said could change the narrative. One evening, Joseph came home to find Marcella standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching rain stream down the glass. The city beyond was a blur of lights and water, beautiful and cold. "The board wants me to make a statement," he said quietly, "about us. They think the publicity is affecting stock prices." Marcella didn't turn. "What kind of statement?" "That we're reassessing our relationship, that I'm focused on the company." They want you to leave me. They can want whatever they like. He crossed to her, his reflection joining hers in the glass. I'm not leaving you. Joseph, your empire is crumbling. Then let it crumble. His voice was fierce. I built it once. I can build it again. But you, he turned her to face him. You, I can't rebuild if I lose you. Tears slid down her cheeks. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You're not. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Whoever's doing this, they're the reason. Not you, never you. But if you weren't here, I'd still be that man at the gala, lonely, going through motions, building things that meant nothing. His voice dropped, raw and honest. Marcella, you are the reason I found something worth keeping. It was the closest he'd come to saying I love you without the words. And Marcella felt it like a blade and a balm simultaneously, cutting through her defenses, healing wounds she'd thought were permanent. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and terrified, because she was starting to understand that loving someone meant trusting them with your worst fears, meant believing they'd stay even when staying cost them everything. But that night, as they lay tangled together, listening to thunder shake the windows, Marcella made a decision. If she couldn't protect Joseph from the attacks, she could at least remove herself as the target. She could walk away before he lost everything that mattered. The morning came with headlines that made the decision inevitable. Leaked documents reveal Marcella Bench's medical records show complete infertility. Someone had gone beyond tabloid cruelty into outright criminal territory. Her private medical files, illegally obtained, were now public knowledge. Every detail of her diagnosis, every failed treatment, every heartbreaking doctor's note, all of it exposed for the world to judge. Joseph was in back-to-back emergency meetings. The company was hemorrhaging value. His phone hadn't stopped ringing in days. Marcella stood in his penthouse looking at the life they'd tried to build, his shirts in the closet beside her dresses, their coffee cups still on the kitchen counter. The book he'd been reading to her at night, bookmark holding their place. She'd never felt more loved or more certain that she had to leave. You deserve someone who can give you everything, she wrote on hotel stationery she'd been carrying for days. Not someone who can't give you a family. She packed her bags while the city woke up below, left the key on the counter, walked out before she could change her mind. 3 hours later, Joseph came home to silence. He called her name, already knowing, found the note on the pillow where she'd slept beside him just hours before, and the man known for composure, for control, for building empires with steady hands, fell to his knees clutching a piece of paper that held every fear she'd ever carried. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city continued. Traffic moved. People lived their lives. But Joseph Rudd's world had just ended, and all the money in his accounts couldn't buy back what he'd lost. The children's home sat 40 miles outside the city, surrounded by trees and space, and the kind of quiet Marcella had been craving. She'd found it through an old colleague who ran volunteer programs, a safe house for orphaned and abandoned children. Chronically underfunded, but full of dedicated staff who chose love over paychecks. We can always use extra hands, the director, Mrs. Chen, had said, though I have to warn you, it's heartbreaking work. I know, Marcella had replied, because heartbreak was familiar. She knew how to function through it. Her room was small, a converted office with a twin bed and a window that overlooked the garden. She volunteered full-time in exchange for room and board, telling herself this was penance, protection, the right thing. The children, at least, were honest about needing her. 5-year-old Emma, who clutched Marcella's hand during thunderstorms. 7-year-old twins Marcus and Maya, who fought constantly but unified when they sensed Marcella's sadness. Baby Lily, left at the gate in a cardboard box, who only stopped crying when Marcella rocked her. She was surrounded by children, the very thing she couldn't have, and somehow it was both agony and healing. Every night she tucked them into bed with stories and lullabies, wiped tears and kissed scraped knees, became the mother she'd thought she'd never be, in ways she'd never expected. And every night alone in her small room, she thought of Joseph's words, I have enough love for both of us. She'd walked away to save him, but some stubborn part of her heart kept asking, what if he was right? What if love really was enough? Joseph stopped going to board meetings after the second week. His lawyers handled the business. His CFO managed daily operations. He told them all the same thing. I'll be back when I've found her. Found who? His assistant asked. The only thing that matters. He hired investigators, called every contact she'd ever mentioned, visited her old apartment, empty, lease terminated. Her friends didn't know. Her family had no information. Marcella had vanished like smoke, and Joseph was left grasping at nothing. At night, he stood at the windows where she'd stood, tracing the path of rain on glass. His empire was crumbling. James had been arrested for embezzlement 2 days ago, breaking down under questioning and revealing Harriet's involvement. The damage was catastrophic but fixable. What wasn't fixable was the Marcella-shaped hole in his life. She left to protect you, his lawyer said. Maybe you should respect that. Respect her destroying herself for my reputation? Joseph's laugh was bitter. No. Then what will you do? Find her, he said simply, and remind her that I chose her, that I still choose her, that I'll keep choosing her until she believes it. The break came on a Wednesday evening. An invoice for a donation by Wittian, Joseph's foundation automatically sent quarterly checks to various charities. One recipient, Children's Haven House, a home for orphans outside the city. The director's thank you note mentioned a new volunteer who'd brought light back to our halls. Joseph's instincts knew before his mind confirmed. He was in his car before sunset, driving toward a place he'd never been, but somehow felt destined to find. The children's home glowed in the fading light, a converted mansion with sprawling grounds, gardens, and the sound of laughter echoing from somewhere unseen. Joseph parked and walked toward the sound, following voices to a back garden where children played. And there, kneeling in the grass surrounded by kids drawing with chalk, was Marcella. She was laughing, really laughing, as a little girl showed her a picture of what appeared to be a rainbow dragon. Her hair was loose, her jeans grass-stained, her face radiant with something pure and unguarded. Joseph stopped breathing. This was what she'd meant. I can't give you a family. But here she was, surrounded by children who needed her, offering love without bloodlines or biology, building family in the rubble of what she thought she'd lost. One of the children, a boy about 7, noticed Joseph first. Miss Marcella, there's a man watching. Marcella looked up. Their eyes met across the garden, time suspended. Every argument, every fear, every reason she'd left crystallized between them. Then she was standing, walking toward him with slow, uncertain steps. You shouldn't be here, she said softly when she reached him. I know. His voice was rough. But neither should you. Not alone. Joseph, I found James, he interrupted, and Harriet. They're both being charged. The smear campaign, the leaks, it was them, not you. Never you. Tears filled her eyes. That doesn't change what I am, what I can't give you. You're right. It doesn't change that you're the woman I love, that you're the only thing I've built that's real, that every day without you has been, his voice cracked, empty, pointless, wrong. But the company is a company. I built it once. I can build it again. But you, he stepped closer. You, I can't rebuild. You, I can't replace. You, I need more than anything I've ever achieved. Behind them, children had stopped playing, watching with wide eyes. The little girl with the rainbow dragon tugged Marcella's sleeve. Is he your husband? She asked in a stage whisper. Marcella laughed through tears. Not yet, Joseph said, dropping to one knee in the grass beside her. But I'm working on it. The charity gala at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel was the social event of the season. 200 guests, $10,000 a plate, every influential person in the city packed into the ballroom under crystal chandeliers. Joseph Rudd stood at the podium, immaculate in his tuxedo, with the confidence of a man who'd already survived his worst nightmare. Behind him, screens displayed financial documents. Evidence. A paper trail that led from James Gibbs to Harriet Trim to a coordinated campaign of harassment and embezzlement. For the past 3 months, Joseph said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, Someone has been trying to destroy my company, not through competition or innovation, but through cruelty, by attacking the woman I love, by making her private pain public entertainment. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. James Gibbs, my former partner, embezzled $14 million. Harriet Trim orchestrated a harassment campaign that included illegally obtaining medical records and coordinating tabloid smears. He paused, letting it sink in. Both have been arrested. Both will face justice. Harriet sat at a center table, her face ashen, trapped by the crowd and cameras. But here's what they didn't understand, Joseph continued, his voice softening. You can take my company. You can attack my reputation. You can leak every private detail of my life. His eyes found someone in the back of the room. But you can't take my peace. You can't take what matters. Marcella stood near the exit, wearing the ivory gown from that first night, her hand pressed to her mouth. The woman you tried to destroy, Joseph said, looking directly at Harriet now, is the only thing I've ever built that was real, the only investment that ever mattered, and she's worth more than every dollar I've ever made. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Harriet was escorted out by security while James was already in custody. But Joseph ignored all of it. He stepped off the stage and walked through the crowd and toward Marcella, who was crying and smiling and shaking her head. You didn't have to do that, she said when he reached her. Yes, I did. He took her hands. I needed the world to know what you were worth, since you still don't quite believe it. She laughed, wet, grateful, overwhelmed. Take me home? Always. And as they left together, someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another, then the entire ballroom was applauding. Not for scandal, not for spectacle, but for something real finally breaking through the performance. The rain came without warning. Marcella stood at the window of the children's home, watching headlights cut through the downpour. She knew those headlights, knew the car, knew the man driving through a storm to reach her. She stepped outside, immediately soaked, as Joseph parked and emerged into the rain. They faced each other in the downpour, two people who tried to protect each other by pulling apart, now understanding that protection wasn't the same as love. Joseph dropped to one knee in the mud, pulling a ring box from his jacket. I don't need heirs, he said, rain streaming down his face. I don't need biology or bloodlines or any of the things the world says matter. I need you and those kids in there. He gestured to the home behind her, where children's faces pressed against windows, watching. You've already given me a family. I just didn't see it until I lost you. Marcella's tears mixed with rain. Joseph, I can't. You can, he interrupted gently, just not the way the world expects. Marcella, we'll adopt them. All of them, if you want. We'll build the foundation house you've been dreaming about. We'll create family in every way that matters. He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the light despite the storm. Marry me. Not because it's expected or traditional or any of those things. Marry me because I choose you. Every day, in every way, forever. She fell to her knees in the mud beside him, cupping his face in her hands. You're sure, she whispered. You won't regret. Never. His voice was absolute. Marcella, you taught me that love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about who they are when everything's stripped away. And you, soaked in rain, surrounded by other people's children, still worried about my happiness instead of your own. You're everything. She kissed him then, tasting rain and salt and the future they'd almost thrown away. Yes, she breathed against his lips. Yes, yes, yes. Behind them, children erupted in cheers from the windows. The rain poured harder, cleansing, renewing, washing away the scandal and shame and every lie that said they weren't enough. And in the mud and the storm, two people rebuilt themselves from the foundation up, choosing each other not despite their scars, but because of them. 6 months later, the mansion that had once been the Children's Haven House transformed into the Rudd Foundation home, a permanent residence funded by Joseph's fortune and managed by Marcella's heart. The adoption papers came through in waves. First Emma, whose thunderstorm fears gradually eased with consistent love. Then the twins, Marcus and Maya, who stopped fighting quite so much when they realized no one was sending them away. Finally, baby Lily, who'd grown from an infant in a box to a toddler who called them both Mama and Dada without hesitation. The grand estate echoed with noise now, laughter, arguments, the thunder of small feet on marble floors. Joseph had architects convert wings into family spaces, classrooms, gardens where children who'd known only concrete could finally run free. One evening, as sunset painted the windows gold, Joseph found Marcella in the music room. She was playing piano, something she hadn't done since before her diagnosis, while Emma sat beside her, picking out a melody with one finger. He lifted Lily onto his hip, watching. Marcella's voice rose soft and clear, teaching Emma a simple song, and Joseph felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. "You see, Marcella," he said when the song ended, "I told you I have enough love for both of us." She looked up, tears shining but smiling. "You did, and I finally believe you." That night, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city that had tried to break them. Lights sparkled below like scattered stars. Music drifted up from the house where their children played before bed. "Do you ever think about what we lost?" Marcella asked quietly, her head on his shoulder. Joseph wrapped his arms around her, solid and sure. "No," he said, watching the city glow. "Only what we found." Below, Marcus chased Maya through the garden. Emma helped Mrs. Chen set the table. Lily toddled after a cat, laughing with pure joy. This was family, not bound by blood, but by choice, by staying when leaving would have been easier, by believing that love, stubborn, fierce, imperfect love, could heal what the world called broken. The lights of the city shimmered like promises, and in the mansion that had learned to breathe again, two hearts beat steady, scarred but whole, knowing that sometimes the family you find is the one you were always meant to have. The end was really a beginning, and it was beautiful.